Welcome, fellow Toa, to the Bionicle Inspiration series. Today, we're continuing the 2009 Spotlight collab that we were doing last week, and this time we're finishing it off with the other 10 entries. So essentially what this is, hey, we're taking a look at different interpretations, different revamps, different takes on the characters from the Bara Magna wave, the 2009 wave of Bionicle sets, the second wave specifically. We're taking a look at that range of sets being reimagined. And what is the Bionicle Inspiration series in case you're new? Well, we take a look at mocks across the Bionicle community, and we talk a little bit about them. What sort of techniques are they using? What sort of ideas, tips and tricks? What sort of stuff is being used? And I'll share my insight, and we'll just have a nice little chat. And hey, we get to look at some pretty cool mocks. That's a nice bonus. So let's begin. The very first mock we've got today is Gelu, and it has been built by Ron Folkers. So last time I did this, I read some quotes for the characters that I got off of the Bionicle Wikipedia, and I'm going to do the same, because that was really fun. So let's read the quote or sort of description for our boy Gelu. Gelu was at one point the second Glatorian for the Ice Tribe. However, he later quit the job as a Glatorian and instead worked as an escort for convoys. Poor choice of words of Wikipedia, but hey, interesting backstory. I always liked that about Gelu, the fact that he's like, I don't want to be a Glatorian like everyone else, I don't want to fight for a living, instead I'm going to get some like mercenary work, some bodyguard work, some bounty hunting work, that kind of thing. And I always thought that was cool, and I reckon that Ron actually here has kind of captured that aesthetic. You know, I love the fact there's a little bit of asymmetry specifically on the arms, you know? Part of me looks at that and goes, is the black bit sort of like armor? Is it some sort of like replacement limb? Was he like originally wearing a shirt and everything ripped off except for one sleeve, and he's like, you know what, that's my aesthetic now? I don't know, but I think it's really cool. There's something about it combined with the fact that there's all those like Lego ropes across his chest there. I don't know, there's just something that's very different about that, and I feel like for that kind of bounty hunter aesthetic, it really pays to have some sort of really unique like kind of gambit or quirk or thing about you that sort of sets you apart or really makes you look like a mercenary. It makes it look like you're someone who you don't really want to mess with. I don't know, Gelu just kind of has that aesthetic here. There's just something really nice about it. That being said, I always really liked Gelu as a set. I always thought that the mask specifically was awesome. I loved his big old spiky shoulders, and his weapon was cool. I always really liked my boy Gelu, so it's great to see him being reimagined here, and being reimagined so well. So I think it's great that he's really captured that, as Wikipedia called it, escort aesthetic. But I would probably call it a bounty hunter aesthetic more so. Still, some other stuff that I enjoy in this mock is specifically the upper legs, using those two Nokama Hordika masks there. There's something really nice about that. The general shape of them and the kind of flow as it sort of builds up a bit bigger at the back of the head and sort of angles inward towards the front mouth of that Nokama mask. Angling them in that fashion as sort of like thigh armor from a certain point of view. It could just be thigh, it doesn't have to be an armor. Just the general flow of that mask really naturally sort of matches the shape of a typical thigh or an upper leg, whatever you want to call it. I love that. I think it looks great. And the way it just sort of very neatly transitions into the rest of the waist there, I just think that's a really nice combination of pieces. And I think using Bionicle masks there's a lot of different uses for them, whether it's like shoulders, which we'll see some mask shoulder usages throughout this episode. But, you know, I've seen people use like Rakshi heads or the Rakshi sort of spine pieces. Also the back piece, not the spine itself, and stuff like this, using masks and stuff for leg armor of sorts, and you can get some really nice results with it, and I think this one really, really stands out, especially even how it transitions into the blue Anika shoulder armor piece as well. And so again, just a nice transition of parts there. I think it looks really, really schmick. And I like the fact that the bottom is a little bit more blue, could look like sort of boots of sorts, or it's just a nice kind of transition of colors too. They just sort of work nicely within one another. I think that's just nice to note. Something else that I think is really nice is the choice of weapon here. So it's very similar to Gelu's original weapon. He's sort of extended it into more of a staff. But I like the fact that it does have that slight curve to it, that sort of zigzag almost. That's just really unique, really different, you know? There are kind of some weapons in the real world that have that sort of curve to them like that. But I also like the fact that, again, it's just a little bit more quirky, a little bit more different. It's the kind of thing where if you got into a fight with Gelu or you saw him walking down a dark alleyway or something and you see that weapon, you'd be like, what the heck is that? And that alone is intimidating. And, you know, in his line of work, maybe that's really important. So a lot of really lovely stuff here on this Gelu revamp. And I think he's really captured the spirit of the character in a very nice light. Let's move on to the next mock now. This is by Stud Zone, and this is Raanu the Leader. So, of course, Raanu, let us read some of the information from Wikipedia. Raanu was the Agori leader of the Fire Tribe. And that's more or less all that it said in the beginning description. It goes on later, but I'm not going to read all of that. But let's read Raanu's quote. "We'll make them wish they never came here. Let the bone hunters raid some other village." So, you could read that quote and be like, what a nice guy. He's a bit of a leader. He's looking after his people and he's giving them a rallying speech. Or he's like, let him go somewhere else, Why are they going to disturb us? That'll be someone else's problem, So either really good leader or kind of lazy and not that reliable. You can decide. Anyway, Raanu. I always saw him as a really, almost sort of like a bit of a Vakama, Turaga Vakama. I saw him as a little bit more of a sort of noble, wise leader of sorts. And I really like that he's kind of captured that aesthetic here, specifically by giving him that really, really awesome cloth piece that came on the Rey Star Wars Ultra Build set, the beautiful dark tan robe like that. I love that he's put the little chain around the waist too. It's a lovely little detail on that, and definitely fills in some of the holes that are naturally on that specific piece as well. But I think just the general concept of using robes for sort of like wise leader characters, there's a lot of sort of symbolism behind that, isn't there? You look at like Jedi, very wise, noble leaders and warriors, or you look at like monks, or heck, like I said before, Vakama, Turaga Vakama in the original Bionicle movies, they gave them sort of very similar robe-like attire. So, there's kind of a lot of association with wearing more sort of regal robes like that with very kind of wise, noble people. So I certainly think that's a very smart thing to do, especially, he called him Raanu the leader. Seems very fitting. But on top of that too, it's just, I think, a great way to just sort of detail up a more sort of simplistic Matoran-esque build, It's a simplistic build for sure. It's using a lot of very typical prefab Hero Factory bones and armor pieces with some tires thrown in there. The tires look very schmick, by the way. But just because it's a little bit more simplistic doesn't mean that it's in any way a bad build. I think this is a brilliant interpretation of Raanu. And I love the fact, too, that he's stripped back a lot of the red and has instead given him more sort of like almost armor of sorts. I imagine this being more sort of like ceremonial armor, or maybe he just, he's like, I always wear armor because it's comfy and easy to wear, Who knows? Still, I love that. It makes it look like, hey, he doesn't have a helmet on. That's his, like, natural face. And he's got a cool flame sword, and that's his schmick and schmam armor. Schmam? It's not a word, but we'll pretend it is. Still, I love that. I love that look. It makes a lot of sense. It seems very fitting, and it's a very different take on Raanu, and kind of most Bionicle sets for that matter. But I think it's one that really, really works, and works in some surprising and unique ways. It's really nice. Speaking of that flame sword, though, I love the inclusion of the red rubber band, just sort of on the very top of the hilt of the blade. The fact that it kind of looks like a bit of an extension of that flame sword. So it almost looks like the flames are sort of dancing even further down onto the hilt itself, or maybe kind of really emanating out of a part of the sword, or the hilt rather. I really like that. It's just a nice kind of continuation of that piece. Really makes it look like it's really a part of that sword and not just a sort of tacked on bit of fire or something like that. It's just a nice little bit of consistency there. I think that's really, really welcome. I also love the torso, the fact that he's put that marbled Zamasphere in there that came on a bunch of the... came in some of the... Did it come in the Chima sets? I want to know. I think it came in the Fire Villain sets from Hero Factory 2.0, I want to say. But the fact that kind of matches the mask too, I think, again, that's just some nice consistency there that makes the head seem even more welcome with this very different, darker, armored aesthetic that he has. So overall, a fantastic design and a very unique take on Raanu that I absolutely adore. Let's move on to another mock that I absolutely adore. It's by Radar, and this is Stronius the Brute. So let's read some of the information on Stronius the Brute from the old Bionicle wiki. Stronius was an elite-class Skrull who was given a name after he destroyed a bacteria and discovered that they were mechanical. It's kind of cool. It's an interesting look into the culture of the Skrull, the fact that they didn't actually have names except for Stronius, and you kind of had to earn a name, If you wanted to be given more of a sense of identity, you had to do something good that was notable for the cause, I like that. I like that a lot. It's just a fun bit of storytelling there. But this specific Stronius revamp, I think he's done an awesome job. The thing I love the most is the choice of using those Pyrox masks, the dark red ones on the lower arms there, using them as those sort of like gauntlets, and then also transitioning them into those sort of very rocky pieces in dark red. Never realized how similar the textures on those two were. Seems very fitting, makes sense. In fact, I think they came on the same set. So, hey, maybe I should have realized they had similar textures. But those two pieces also have very similar textures to the other Stronius armor that came on the original set, whether that's the mask that's been used or those big black shoulder pieces that are also used on the torso as well. They have that very like rocky, spiky texture to them, which is quite like sinister, quite evil, but I don't know, also kind of gives me this sense of like the terrain that they live in, which, Bara Magna was a very sort of barren desert environment with, rocks, canyons, all that sort of stuff. So it's kind of a reflection of where they might live, maybe. But I never realized how similar those pieces were in texture. So it's lovely to see those two partnered together like that. And I like the fact that he's concentrated a lot of the dark red just on the arms. There's a little hint of it on the legs as well. I think that's very fitting. But it's just great to see those pieces partnered together because they look like they were meant to go together, which is was really nice when you find pieces that just very nicely fit with one another like that. It's really cool. But also, too, just the general shape of those Pyrox masks. They actually work quite well for gauntlets. The fact that the very top of it sort of has that kind of almost like those car rim pieces that come on Lego City like car sets. That was kind of where you sort of inserted the brain slug into that mask on the original set. The fact that those kind of neatly frame sort of like a guard around the hand, and the fact that it kind of transitions up with those spikes, it very much looks like that of a vambrass or a gauntlet of sorts. And I like the fact that the mask almost sort of looks like maybe some kind of carvings on this gauntlet, like it's a little bit more ornate, or it's made to look a little bit more intimidating or really kind of regal or special perhaps. And that's cool, It's just a really, really solid use of that piece. I would definitely say a good old NPU to that. Very nice part use, sir. Love what you've done. And also, too, let's take a look at the lower legs here. The choice of using that Knight's Kingdom armor from the old Construction Knight's Kingdom sets. Of course, Knight's Kingdom was a really cool theme that had a system counterpart, but also had some Construction-like figures. And they came with some pretty cool armor pieces, which, you see used a bunch in different Bionicle sets, and you can see them being used very well here. And again, they have that very spiky, sort of sinister texture to them, which works perfectly with all these pieces. So some really, really solid texture work at play here, and overall just a really solid revamp, really, really kind of buffing him out even more, making him look even more brutish and sinister and evil, which is certainly, I think, the aesthetic of the Skrull there. So love your work. Let us move on now to the next mock. It is Berix, and this is by Plopi PB. Yes. So, let us read the Wikipedia entry on Berix. There's not a lot. Berix was an Agori of the Water Tribe. Thanks, Berix. Let's read his quote. It says, "No trial, no treasure." Nice. So, of course, there's more on his Wikipedia page, but that's just all there is at the very, very top of the article. And that's all I'm reading for these guys here, so not a lot that we can talk about with Berix, but hey, fun fact about Berix. He played a big role in the Legends Reborn Bionicle movie, a movie that I thoroughly enjoyed, and he was voiced by the great James Arnold Taylor, who also voiced Obi-Wan Kenobi in the Clone Wars, and a bunch of other stuff. And he's a great voice actor. He's voiced a bunch of different things that you're probably aware of, so hey, lovely and really good to see our boy James Arnold Taylor getting a bit of respect in the Lego world as well. Anyway, I think he also voiced Lego Flash. Anyway, moving on. Berix. I love Berix as a character, especially the fact that he had a Cars mask, but in blue. I don't know, that always grabbed me as a kid. I was like, wow, look at that. I don't know, there was just a nice little special place in my heart for Berix. I think he's cool. So some of the really nice stuff that's been included on this revamp here is a really nice integration of system pieces. I specifically love how it's been done on the torso, how it kind of almost gives him this sort of like collared effect, using some of those interesting kind of slope pieces there around the neck and slightly angling them. I think it just looks like some very, very nice looking armor of sorts, and additional system pieces being used around the shoulders and other places there. It's just a very different look, and it's kind of not something you see every day on a Bionicle, that very, very system heavy sort of detailing and armor design like that. I don't know, I really do quite enjoy that. I think it looks really unique, really different, really stands out. And seeing a bit more system being used on the lower legs as well, they kind of perfectly transition into those slicer heads there. That's just some really nice kind of progression of pieces like that. I really love how that looks. And then specifically to looking at those feet, again, very system heavy, but the general kind of shape of them very much reminds me of the Mutter feet as well. So just interesting to note. I don't know if that was the specific inspiration or not, but it's a nice looking foot design using, again, more sort of curved slopes and some wedge plates and things. And it looks pretty cool. Looks really cool indeed. So lovely to see a whole bunch of system pieces being integrated in with kind of more minimal Bionicle pieces, actually. The more I look at it, there's not a lot of Bionicle or Technic-esque pieces in here. So really nice to see a more sort of system-heavy Bionicle that really still shines and really still captures the spirit of the original character. Really, really solid work. Let's move on now to the next mock. This is by Elemental Hero Shadow, and it is, of course, Mutanui. There's a lot I like about this one. I love the fact that he's made him more primarily gold. The original Mutanui sets were a little more yellow. They did have some highlights of gold, depending on which Mutanui set we're looking at, but I think it makes sense. It's Mutanui. It's the Great Spirit. Why not make him a little bit more sort of gold and regal? I think it's very fitting for the character. And speaking of being fitting for the character, let's not jump ahead. Let's read that Wikipedia little quote or entry for Mutanui. This one, there was a lot of, so I'm not reading all that was in that original sort of first bit of the Wikipedia page. I'm just going to get a small section of it, because otherwise we'll be here all day. But, what does it say? Mutanui was the great spirit created by the great beings to explore and observe the galaxy. For a time, he was condemned to an eternal slumber, with many Toa going on journeys to revive him. Fair enough, fair enough. But yeah, he's the great spirit, like we said. So I love that this build very much reflects that, giving him this very big sort of regal kind of royal look. I love the inclusion of, again, we see that same cloth piece there, the Ray dark tan cloth piece. I like the fact that it's been used as sort of waist armor. It very much reminds me of aesthetics that you see on more sort of like regal knights, or very kind of royal, powerful, strong, well-regarded knights. You might see that in sort of medieval fantasy worlds or other different storytelling, seeing that kind of waist cloth around their waist there. I think that's a lovely little detail, and I think very much fits the aesthetic that our boy is going with here, to really make Mutanui look like, not a god, I never really saw Mutanui as a god, but, make him look like the very distinguished, powerful character that he is, I also love, too, the choice of the kind of printing or sticker pieces that have been used here on the legs. So I think those upper leg pieces, I think those are stickers, and I want to say they come from the Chitauri from the Avengers sets. I might be wrong, but I swear I recognize those stickers. I'm sure Mr. Elemental Hero Shadow will correct me on that, but I want to say that's where that's from. So hey, great use of official stickers, if that is the case. If not, hey, they're cool printed pieces. Nice. And those printed pieces, if there aren't those Chitauri stickers, might be similar to the lower leg pieces here, those gold armored pieces with this really beautiful, very sort of ornate printing there. Those, I believe, are not official LEGO pieces, and I want to say they are from like AliExpress or some sort of bootleg LEGO set, or construction set for that matter, not officially a LEGO set. And a bunch of those sort of bootleg sets can come with more unique colors or unique printing on pieces and things. Of course, they're not the same quality as an official LEGO piece, but, hey, in this day and age where construction doesn't even exist anymore as a LEGO sub-theme, sometimes it's worth buying some bootleg stuff or some custom stuff or things like that, just so you have some new variety of pieces that you can play with. Could be a good impetus to just give you a bit of inspiration, get those creative juices flowing, all that sort of stuff. So, hey, not officially LEGO to my knowledge, but looks pretty cool. And again, I think really fits the aesthetic that he's going for here on Mutanui. Another really ornate, awesome feature is the sword and the shield that Mutanui has here. So that shield piece is from a Ninjago set. It's from a couple Ninjago sets, but I think the piece is slightly different depending on which Ninjago set you have. But I believe it's like a gold mech or a sort of gold and white mech. It might even be called the gold mech or something. I don't know my Ninjago lore that well. Stumbling over my words there, but my Ninjago lore, I don't know it that well. But I love how he sort of expanded upon this shield piece even more by adding that beautiful black octagonal connector piece, putting a bunch of those robot arm pieces in gold and those cool like sort of sword pieces in gold, and really kind of buffing out the shield a little bit more, making it look a little bit more kind of reinforced and a bit more powerful, but also just kind of adding to the pattern on the shield even more. And the pattern on that shield, I always thought it when the set originally came out, it's very Skrull-like. It's very similar to the Skrull shield that came on the original Skrull set. They've got very similar patterns to a degree, and it just looks nice. So it's cool to see that sort of very similar like imagery between the two, and it very much kind of it really plants it into the universe of Bara Magna, you know what I mean? Or the planet of Bara Magna, or the culture of Bara Magna, whatever you want to say. So I love that inclusion. I love that detail. I also love the sword, the choice of having that slightly larger, more like katana-like sword, and that more kind of curvy sword, and the way that they're kind of placed next to each other. There is this kind of beautiful sort of consistency to them. It kind of makes it look like it's actually one bigger sword. Those two pieces sort of almost come together, perhaps. So I think that's just a nice choice of just partnering two pieces together to create a really, really solid-looking sword. And even the rest of that sword, whether it's the little details at the bottom or the white bits on the side there, looks really, really solid, really nice. Love this revamp of Mud. I know you've done a great job. Let's move on to the next mock. It's Ackar, and it is by Calcifer Project. Now, Ackar might be my favorite Glatorian and probably is up there in some of my favorite characters from the Bionicle universe. I've always loved Ackar. I love them in the movie. I just love the concept of the character. So let's read his little Wikipedia entry here, because I think it sums up why I love this character a lot. It says, Ackar was the former primary Glatorian of the Fire Tribe. Currently, Ackar is considered an honorary Toa. Love that. The specific quote about him, though, says, if any Glatorian could be considered a living legend, it was he. He was older now, maybe not as fearsome as he was in centuries past, but when he spoke, other Glatorian always listened. And that's cool. He's just a born leader. He's the Optimus Prime. He's the Captain America of the Bionicle world. He's a cool cat. He's nice. He's a cool customer, as you might say. I like him. I like him a lot. And I think this revamp does my boy Ackar justice. I love the fact that he's given him silver armor. I love the fact, because he is a sort of more notable warrior, the fact that he's wearing armor. It just makes sense. It just seems fitting. And the orange, red, and silver color combo, it's really nice. It's really fitting. It's really cool. And it actually goes with his sword surprisingly well, too. Well, the sword that he's given him here specifically, It's cool. I like it. I also really like the choice of, once again, another waistcloth piece, very similar to what we said before. An elite royal guy, or, something cool like that, I also love how he's done the waist design on this, specifically how the waistcloth kind of covers up some areas of it, so it lets you have a little bit of creative license there. But I also love, too, that Hero Factory armor piece on the sort of very bottom of the waist, and the inclusion of those robot arm pieces kind of wrapping around it nicely. It just sort of creates this very realistic look at a sort of waist armor design, and the way that it transitions nicely into the legs looks a lot more seamless. I think that's just a really nice part of the body there specifically, and the general kind of sort of ridge design of that very much matches the shoulder armor as well. It has very similar kind of ridges as well, specifically on the bottom, but also kind of on the top. So nice to see some consistency there. I think that's absolutely awesome. But yeah, really overall, I think this is a great take on Ackar, and it's got some brand new features that really make it pop, really make it shine, and really seem fitting for the character, specifically with what we read on his Wikipedia page there. So, love your work, love Ackar, thanks for doing him justice. Let's move on to the next mock. It's by DJ Make Stuff, and this is Tarduk the Treasure Hunter. I always like this guy too, but let's read his Wikipedia article to learn a little bit more about him. It says, I remember you. Before the war, you led my people. You made things grow. You brought life. Now you just kill, as if it means nothing. So that's not actually about him. That's just something he said once. So, hey, that's nice. Or he's a mass murderer. But no, I think he's talking about the Element Lord of Jungle or something, I think. I don't remember. But hey, that's something that he once said. Be nice if the quote described him. But, I guess it tells us that he doesn't like people just being murdered. So that's good. Always nice when you don't like people being murdered. That's a good character trait. So, hey, there you go. But speaking of people being murdered, I like the fact that this guy has a Wolverine-like aesthetic now. The fact that his mask, it kind of transitions at the back, that it kind of looks a bit like claws. It has those sort of three prongs coming out of the back of it. You can kind of just see it in this picture here. But it's actually quite a large and prominent mask, and a really nice one too. And I like that he's kind of continued that spiked aesthetic all across this mock, whether it's, like I said, the Wolverine claws, awesome looking detail, the claws kind of coming out of the sides of his upper arms there, or the claws on his boots and on his upper legs as well. I really like that he's continued that aesthetic. It looks really cool and just looks really nice. There's something about it that just really pops. I think it's cool. I also like the inclusion of all these different barrel pieces, whether it's the sort of crates on the legs or the barrels themselves on the upper arms. One, they just look nice, but also just the general textures of them just makes it sort of elevated even more. It looks really, really cool. And especially, too, the upper arms there almost look like sort of very long, large gloves that sort of flow further back onto the lower arm there. As the hands very nicely transition into them. Looks like big hearty gloves of sorts with those claws attached to them, I think it's really, really cool. I also love, too, this is definitely my favorite part of this mock, is the inclusion of all these different accessories around his belt there. Using that minifigure backpack, using that telescope piece with the little feathers, the lightsaber rod with the little unicorn spike coming out of it. he's got little doodads and thingamajigs that he plays with, you know? He's going out looking for treasure. He's the treasure hunter, you know? He's got little stuff to help him along with his journey. I think that's awesome. I love seeing little accessories and details on Bionicles like that. I always think it's a really welcome, cool-looking addition, and really shines here, especially just as this sort of utility belt of sorts that he's got. I think that's cool. Final thing, because I really love this one. I love the general kind of rough shape of his sort of shoulders and torso. Almost kind of looks like that of like a puff jacket. But I don't see it as a jacket. I see it as just kind of the general natural shape of his body. But I don't know, it's just a nice kind of silhouette there. It just looks really cool. So a lot to love about this guy. Some really nice design choices and some other little aesthetically pleasing things that he's got as well. Love your work. Let's move on now to the next one. This is also by Elemental Hero Shadow, I believe. And this is Kiina the Vindicated. So again, some really cool stuff about this. I always like Kiina as well. She was also in the Legends Reborn movie, and there's some lovely little details on this that I definitely want to highlight because you've done a good job. I love the inclusion of the little metallic crab there on the waist, maybe some sort of like ornate armor of sorts, and it's got sort of like sea-esque material or patterns or designs and things. That's really cool. Really nice little inclusion there, kind of tying her back to her water roots. Speaking of which, I love the custom harpoon design that she's got there. The original one, of course, had its own sort of harpoon piece, but it's nice to see a custom version being built there. I like that she has a net as well, whether that's just if she wants to go fishing and she's just got one by her side, or maybe it's like a satchel, or just, I don't know, she's got a net there because why not? It looks cool, you know? I think it's very fitting, and again, it ties it back to the water roots, and I don't know, I see that a lot on water-based mocks, really, the sort of finding ways that you can sort of subtly make callbacks to the element that they have, you know, whether it's the harpoon, the crab, the net. There's a lot of little stuff here, and it works really well, so I adore that. I love that. Very nice little tiny feature there. And then the final thing we'll talk about this, because I could probably go on with this mock, but, you know, we're getting on in the episode, so, and I've still got a couple more to talk about, so I'll move on, but you know, let it be known, I love what you've done here. I love the foot design here. The inclusion of that little tooth plate piece, almost as like a, kind of to me it looks like the bit where you sort of insert your toe on a sandal, a very sensible sandal, you know? I see it like she's wearing like sandals of sorts. I don't know, I think it's a clever little design, and it works for a foot design, and you can kind of see how it's being made there too, where you get some of those mixel joints and you just sort of attach them very nicely onto the foot there, and you get that front bit of the foot. Very nice looking design, pretty cool. But yeah, overall, lovely little bits of system detailing throughout this mock. Love those plastic fin pieces from some minifigure, Ninjago minifigures, the collectible minifigure series is where those came in. Very much looks like fish fins, or like maybe even a splash of water, perhaps. It's pretty cool. So yeah, lots to love about this one. Really well designed, and a great way of reimagining Kiina. And normally I start with the quote, but I forgot it on Kiina, so we'll end with the quote for Kiina. So if you're like, that was cool, but who is she? Time to learn. Kiina was the second Glatorian of the Water Tribe, and was one of the most skilled female Glatorian in Bara Magna. There you go. Alright, the second last mock now. This is by Student Scissors, and this is Vastus the Sage. So, I adore this. I love this. I love the big focus on the fact that he is he hails from the sort of jungle village. Jungle is his, you know, kind of element of choice. Was he air? I don't know, I always saw him a bit more as like jungle-esque, you know? But still, I like that he's up to those jungle aesthetics, because the original set really did have that. He had sort of like very vine-like armor and sort of elements of vines on his weapon as well, which I always thought was really cool. So I like that that's being continued here. So including a whole bunch of these beautiful new leaf pieces here as a sort of very leafy aesthetic, whether he has like leaf armor or he's actually attached leaves of sorts onto his armor just because it looks cool. Either way, I think it's really fitting and cool. I love the inclusion, too, of a bit of lime thrown in there with dark green and that very light, bright green, I believe it's called. Nice to see all of that thrown in there. There's quite a lot of green in there, but it works quite well, specifically with how he's blocked it all out and really layered those colors as well. It's very fitting. Again, I love the inclusion of a bit of brown on this as well. The choice to have barrels again for the arms. Love that. And I also love that consistency, the fact that another person used barrels, so he also did. This is a collab, so it's really nice to see when other people do similar sort of design concepts, and there's a bit of unity between the different builders. I love seeing that. Great sense of community and a lovely sense of cohesion between the mocks as well. It's great. There's also something about the choice of that barrel piece, because it looks very wooden. It looks very much like that of like a tree trunk, perhaps. You know, it's the bits of brown there. You know, they could be like leather or just sort of brown armor of sorts, but it makes it look like he has like bark skin, or he's reinforced his armor with the very strong bark of the trees in his area. You know, it's a really cool, really fitting design, I think. I really adore that, and it really works with the aesthetic that they're really trying to really heavily focus on here. Also, the inclusion of a bunch of these very small brown tread pieces, very much looking, again, like a bit of bark or maybe some vines of sorts. The fact that it's like a belt or just sort of some sort of detail around his leg there. I love that. Very nice addition. And the final thing I love about this is the way that he's reimagined the vine armor that he had on his shoulders and kind of put it on his back. Like it's a bit more of like a cape or some sort of like, I don't know, like sinister sort of spikes. I don't know. It just looks cool. I don't know what it specifically is, but it looks cool. And sometimes that's all that matters. Yes, it can be nice to have reasoning behind what you do, but sometimes if something just looks nice and it doesn't really, it's not based off anything, it's not serving a purpose, but it looks cool, that's all that matters, you know? I think that's a good example of that. So, nice inclusion. All right, love your work. Let's move on to the final mock now. This is a bit of a bigger one, but a cooler one. And it's by Mohammed Marie, and this is Samad and Spitik. But it also technically is the Baroness V7. So I'll read the quotes, and that'll definitely help explain all those different names there as well. So the quotes read, "The Baroness is a chariot wagon used on the planet of Spirus Magna." So that's what the Baroness V7 is. I don't know why it's V7. I guess that's this specific one. Shamad is an Agori outcast living on Spirus Magna. So that's the dude in the chariot. And then the Spitik are two-headed creatures native to Spirus Magna. So there you go. That's what all that stuff is. And also, not a lot on their Wikipedia pages. Anyway, let's talk about this mock, because it's cool. So, again, lovely way of revamping this, making it a bit bigger, a bit more sort of, got a bit more oomph behind it. Looks great. Focusing on Spitik, the interesting two-headed beast. I love specifically the two heads. The choice to include the Ninjago dragon kind of mouthpiece at the bottom there. Very nice looking tooth texture to it, so it very much looks like that of a jaw. It's just a good choice to include that part. And I like the fact that he's used that so that the very top of it makes it look like he's wearing some sort of like armored helmet, you know? Like, I imagine underneath that helmet there is more of that sort of sand green. But, you know, he's got a bit of armor on him so he doesn't get hurt, you know? I like that. It's a nice little addition, and it also helps, you know, make that beautiful custom head. But, yeah, it makes it a little bit more prominent that he's wearing armor of sorts, and I really think that's very fitting and really cool. And also, I like the general aesthetic change on this, that it's a little bit less like some sort of alien creature, and it does look kind of a little bit more horse-like, and makes sense that since this is a chariot as well. So I think that's a nice direction to be taking this. Even though it is very different, it's very fitting for the concept of this. On the chariot itself, the Baroness, as it's called, I love the inclusion of those gold Iruni shield pieces. Just the fact that they're naturally quite large, it very much looks like kind of what you would see on a chariot. And since this chariot is quite large, it needs to house these specific creatures in it. I also like that he's using some of those big pieces to really armor up the Baroness. And I don't know, I think it's just really smart to use bigger, larger pieces like that so that you can build a larger mock like this and not have to use heaps of different parts to armor it up. It's like, no, let's finally put some of those big bulky pieces to use that we just don't touch normally. And since we are building a bit bigger here, now's the time, you know? I think it's just smart and, you know, a great way to just kind of prioritize and use your pieces. It's a little hard to see the rider here. It seems fairly similar to the original source material, but hey, that's a good point. If you are revamping some of the source material, you can leave some parts of it unchanged, but, you know, focus primarily on other stuff and keep it different in whatever ways you want, you know. Again, I'm sure he has changed it in some more notable ways. It is just a little bit harder to tell specifically in this image. I think he's given him some gold armor and like a belt around his like a bandolier of sorts around his chest as well. But a little less to report on that guy. The more of the changes are on other stuff, and those changes are mighty fine and look pretty good. And you know what else is mighty fine and pretty good? All of these mocks. Really well done on this Bara Magna collab. Great to journey back to Bara Magna and see some really solid revamps of these characters. Characters that actually mean quite a lot to me. I still have my my Mutanui's Guide to Bara Magna book next to me on my desk. It's a lovely little book, and I remember really diving in pretty heavy to Bara Magna when all that lore and juicy sets came out at the time. I love that part of Bionicle, so it's great to see that being reimagined and kind of honoured here with these. So love your work. Great idea for a collab as well, and just a pleasant sight to see. So great work, everyone. Anyway, that's it for this episode. If you enjoyed this episode, or hey, you have a collab of your own, and you want to see some of your own mocks or your own collab in the Bionicle Inspiration series, there is an email that you're currently seeing on your screen right now. There's also the email in the description below, so you can copy and paste it if you need. You can send me an email to that email address, include the link to the images for your collab, or let me know in advance that you've got a collab coming along. And I'll be sure to cover it if I have the time, or I'll be sure to cover it, but maybe in the near future. This collab did come out a couple of weeks ago, not as recent as some other collabs that I've covered, but hey, I got around to it in time, so patience is always key there. But yeah, if you've got a mock or you've got a collab you want to let me know about, that's the place to reach me. In the description below, there is also the links to my social media, so if you want to reach out to me there, you want to check out some of my other mocks and things that I've got going on, that's also the place to check all that stuff out. I'm primarily most active on Instagram, I suppose you could say, so maybe that's definitely the place to check out if you want to just pick one. I would suggest that. And also, my Patreon is also in the description there, so you can also take a look at that if you so please, because there's exclusive content there, like my personal podcasts and my private Discord server as well, so you can privately chat with me there. All sorts of juicy additional content over there for you. And also, if you want to take a look at the builders behind these mocks, see some of the other stuff that they've made, there's links in the description below. Be sure to check that out. All right, that's it. Hope you enjoyed. Thanks for watching. Happy building. Bye for now.